way in the back was a table all the way in the back. And at that table just happened to be the HR director from Kiwa. And I sat down with her, and lo and behold, we started creating committees, and I was on her committee because I was on her table. And that's why I'm in human resources. Just because I volunteered, and just because I was late, just because I came to that classroom, and just because I sat with the HR director, and then my work that I did on that committee, she liked what she saw, and from there I ended up getting a job. So it just, I like that story because it kind of shows, if you give a little back to the company and participate, you never know where you might go. I had no idea that I would be interested in human resources, and I see some of the questions on here. What does an HR person do? What do you, I was the same way. What does an HR person do? I had no idea. All I knew was that they taught orientation, and other than that, it was about it. So I think, starting with the first question is, what does an HR director do? Really, we're at the, if I do the job at the best, I'm trying to impact culture. I'm trying to impact the culture, making it a great place to work. I'm trying to impact it, making the employees happy, so that we provide 5-star service, so that we improve the bottom line. And that's the broad picture that I view myself doing, which has any number of different ways. How much we pay employees. Is it fair? Is it below the market, above the market? What are our benefits? Are they what our employees need? Our vacation plan? How are managers treating employees? Many times managers at any resort, and any business, sometimes get promoted because they're good at doing whatever operationally or they were good at doing, but they're not good managers. So sometimes managers are good servers, they're good waiters, bartenders, recreation coordinators, but they're not necessarily a good director or manager. So sometimes we need to train them on how to be that. That could be through classes. So my whole life I've been around that world. When I was at Hershey, there were union employees. So I dealt with unions for 5 years, and that was interesting dynamic on how you manage employees. But these are more the transactional things of HR, which is employee relations, benefits, compensation. The employee relations part is coaching employees about how to work with other employees, coaching them on how to deal with their managers, coaching managers on how to deal with their employees. And so we spend a lot of, probably 30% of my time is involved in just employee relations on a day-to-day basis, because I view myself as kind of like a concierge, and I'm the resource for a manager, and I'm a resource for the employees and supervisors. And so that's what we do. We just constantly are helping them out with any questions they might have. And I usually ask in orientation, what does HR do to the crowd? And the people in orientation, some of them say, you help people? Yes. And then we always seem to get, you fire people. And I say, oh, no, don't put me in the corner of firing people. Or someone will be walking by and they'll say a swear word, and then they'll say, oh, I'm sorry, I apologize, when they're near me. It's like they have this view of HR as sort of like the internal police. I don't view myself that way. I view myself as, again, an advisor to everyone. So if an employee gets fired, they're going to get fired because that's what the manager documented the employee to be fired. And I coached them on how to do it the right way so they wouldn't get sued. And I probably coached the employee on how to interface with the manager and how to improve their situation. So I remember just recently I coached this employee up. They were having problems with their performance, and I gave her advice on, sometimes it's hard to admit fault or admit like maybe you've not been doing something correctly. So I gave her advice on how to say, thank you for the feedback. I'll do what I can to improve my performance, and give the whole diplomatic political answer back to the managers. And she says, thank you, Mike, for the advice. And she went into the meeting, and no more than 30 seconds into the meeting, she started blasting him and said, I'm not listening to you. This is ridiculous. And I'm not going to sign your documents. And lo and behold, a day later, they decided to separate employment with her. So she could have been state employed, but she chose not to, and not to take advice from HR. So no, I don't see myself as firing people. In fact, actually at our resort, I am the person to call someone to tell them they've lost their job. but I'm not really the person that ultimately made the decision. It was the management team, the director, and myself with our attorney to ensure that someone is terminated the correct way. Moving into some other areas, people are talking about what is your favorite go-to program and award that motivates your staff? I mean, we have actual programs where, I don't know if at Kiowa, Paul, where they had like the Diamond Dollar when I was last there. Here we call them a salamander buck, and you give them out. They're worth about $5, $10 salamander money. So, the hotel, it costs $100 to stay here. You have 10 of them, you can stay here on 10 salamander bucks. So we have that as a recognition tool. They're given out for just doing things. People appreciate you helping out. We also have a core value recognition program, which is you nominate somebody who's done something over and above more than a salamander buck. They've done something pretty special. We used to have lunches every month and recognize all those people. Usually you'd be about anywhere from 10 to 20 people. Now with COVID, we don't have lunches. We used to have no food, and now we've moved towards hors d'oeuvres. So it's safer that way. But the HR answer to that question would be, I find the best way to motivate people is to find out what they like to do in their personality. We have a tool here that we use. It's called Predictive Index, and in all my years of HR, it's really a phenomenal tool. We call it PI for short, and it basically tells you what behaviorally motivates people to do what they're strongest doing. Sort of like, I give an analogy. When you look at Superman, he looks like Clark Kent, but when you look at a PI, I can tell you that kryptonite is his weakness, and he can fly, and he's bulletproof. And that's what this tool tells me. And it tells me what they like to do, what's natural for them to do, but it also tells me what it's not natural for them to do. Not that they can't do any of the things, they can, but there's just not natural. And so that tool, I use it with my team. That's how I motivate them. I look at what they like to do, what motivates them, and then I make sure I give them those responsibilities that motivate them. And you don't really need to give out as many salamander bucks if you're really managing your team right, knowing what they enjoy to do. Both of my team members both really like technical knowledge, learning more, being more involved in technical aspects of HR so they can become more knowledgeable. So the more that I give them there and I share knowledge with them, the more they become motivated that they're learning more. So that can also motivate people other than just the typical recognition tools that employers have. Put on my glasses for some parts. What have you found is the best recipe, timing wise, for orientations for new employees? I'm not sure that question. I mean, we do it once every 2 weeks. So no, actually all my 20 years plus HR, we've always struggled with when do we hold orientation. I contacted a hotel. It's called it's the Trump Tower in DC, and they're 5-star. And I asked them, how often do you do orientation? And they say once a month. And you say, can you start work before orientation? No. Is there any exceptions? No. All right. So they have a very firm, and they're 5-star. So a 5-star way to start somebody would have them go to orientation, as that's their first day on the job, and then they start work. And there's a very few organizations are willing to do that on 100% level. We have orientation every 2 weeks, and I still get requests for, can we make an exception? I want to start the cook early. We need a cook this weekend. Today I saw an IRD server that's coming in early, so they're going to train prior to starting an orientation. Do I like that? No, but that's the way our business wants to operate, because it's hard to find people where we're located. So we make exceptions here and there, not all the time, but we do make exceptions. So my advice is typically would have orientation maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, and don't allow people to start work prior to orientation. But if you make an exception like we have, I make the directors of the various areas. So Carrie Bowman, the director of recreation, would have to come to me personally to say, I want to make an exception for my employee. We don't allow managers around the resort to go to my HR coordinators and say, can I start them early? Because it puts too much pressure. And then next thing you know, everybody's starting early. So by directors coming to us, it makes it a lot less frequent, but I don't think it's a best practice, but it's the way we do it. One of the questions someone was asking is, what is your property doing for employee meals around the, well, it says around the holidays. Employee meals, we used to have employee cafeteria, that's been discontinued. So we have no employee cafeteria right now. I'm worried that we might lose it long-term. But for now, we just not, the orientation cafeterias, I mean, the cafeteria right now is just a place where people can get sodas and sit down and have lunch, but there's no food being sold there. We do offer a food truck. We thought that would be fun. So we have a food truck Friday. So they come out to the loading dock and they, it costs money, but you can buy yourself tacos, barbecue, whatever. And employees are finding some really like it. So at least that. We wanted to offer a vending machine in the cafeteria, but that's proving elusive right now. Just trying to find a vending machine company that will come out here. Then we have a lot of COVID related, and I can tell you on March 21st, I thought I was no longer going to have a job. I was calling my parents up and saying I might need help for a few months because I didn't know what was going on. And then I found out that Friday, the 23rd, well, that's not 22nd, 21st, the 20th. On the 20th, I thought I was losing my job. And then on the 20th, by the end of the day, I found out that they were keeping 5 directors, including the general manager. And we were to continue to work, 4 or 5 days a week for 3 months while we were closed. So I was lucky enough, I had my pay reduced, but I had a job, which was key. And so then we thought, well, this thing is not going to be good. We're going to reopen with maybe, we had 430 employees. We're going to open up with maybe 200. There's going to be, HR is going to not have anything to do. We're not going to be having a holiday party. We're not going to have the cafeteria. We're not going to have recognition events. We're not going to be doing training, I assumed. And then we opened up on June 18th. And on June 18th, all of a sudden it was like, well, it seems to be a little busier than we thought. And then we opened with 230. And then we were sending letters off to everybody else saying, you don't have a job. I lost my HR manager. I couldn't fill in my HR coordinator position. And so I was down to 2. And then next thing I know, they said, we need more employees. So over the last, since June 18th till now, we've hired 135 employees. So now we're up at 357 and we're still hiring people. And the business is 100% occupancy on most weekends. And we have 10% business, group business, but we're 95% transients. So everybody is leaving Washington, D.C. and then driving out to us, and we're busy beyond our expectations. We're charging rates of $600 a night, when maybe before it was $450. The restaurants are 2-hour waits to get in. Guests are unhappy that they're paying more because of the longer wait times, but that's just the way it is for right now. Because half of our business used to be eating in conference rooms. Now, when you have 90%, 95% transient, they're all using your outlets. And that's not something the way we're built for. So we have found that wearing masks, social distancing, and not being around someone more than 15 minutes without a mask is the way to go. I know the washing of the hands and all that is effective, but I think what we're finding is that really the CDC is watching this sort of social distancing. That's what we're seeing from the health departments locally. So this was an example that was a wake-up call for all of us. So all of us were all wearing our mask. I wear my mask. I have a shield, actually, like you see at a bank, in my office on my desk. I wear a mask when anybody comes close. We wear a mask out on the floor around our guests. Everybody's wearing masks, and we do it very well. We have um, sanitizer everywhere. And we only had probably about 4 cases of COVID since June 18th. And they were like, we discovered it, they went home. 14 days later, they came back, everything was fine. But our biggest one that was surprising, and I think it's helpful for all of us, is that we found employees when they went to lunch, like housekeepers, all 6 people who were working in housekeeping all went to lunch, all took off their mask and all sat around the table together for a half an hour. So they're eating together, talking to each other, close to each other at a table for more than 15 minutes. And what happened is, well, in one department, one person got COVID, and then everybody else went home, and it went home for 14 days. And they were called saying, this is ridiculous. I shouldn't have to go home for 14 days. And so it made us realize that lunch time is very dangerous for a property. They need to be, we made it so that only 2 could sit at a table. And so if one gets COVID, one goes home, well, 2 go home, but not the whole housekeeping department. This case didn't happen in housekeeping, but it definitely made awareness that if it happened in housekeeping, you would be in serious trouble. So that sort of this is constantly changing. How do we handle COVID? Requiring people to contact me and let me know whether they can come back or not. People are asking, can I come? I have the sniffles and I got a sore throat. Can I come into work? Do I have COVID? I don't know. Call the doctor. So I direct them all out to their doctors now. Doctors make the decisions, and then they have to provide me a note as to what the doctor said before they come back. So yeah, we've partially become doctors here, and we don't like that feeling. So we're sending them out to the doctors. The progressive discipline with mask wearing, we went through a period there. We created a committee called the COVID ambassadors. I'm on it. There's probably like 8 of us, and we wander around the resort every day of the week. I have Mondays, and we walk around, and if you see someone without a mask on, we tell them, put your mask on. We make sure the hand sanitizer is all full all around the resort. And there was some areas that didn't care or didn't follow the rules, or, you know, this whole kind of the mixed messaging that was coming from the CDC and the White House, and some people saying it's not a big deal. Some people wear a mask, some people don't want to wear a mask. Our guests are that way. Some of the guests come in and say, this is ridiculous. I don't have to wear a mask. I don't want to wear a mask. Why are you wearing a mask? Same things occur with the employees. And so some of them didn't care about wearing a mask. But the whole situation where they realized, even if I don't get COVID, but I'm around someone who has COVID, I could get sent home for 14 days. That woke up a lot of people. Because a lot of people feel like, well, it's only a 0.5% of the people that have a problem. It's not really a big deal. It's just like the flu. But as soon as they heard, it doesn't matter whether you have COVID. If you have your mask off, you're going home for 14 days. Now like one guy, he's in landscaping. He's outdoor 8 hours a day. He's walking around with his mask on, even if he's not near anybody. So it scared a lot of people, that part. Well, talking about how we keep employees safe, it's just really, I mean, I even think colleges could probably go back, not football games and not big cafeterias, but they could probably go back to classes, because we do orientation we had 20 people last week, all of them wearing masks. I was wearing a mask, they were wearing masks, and we were able to kept them 6 feet apart. And we were able to do that, and we haven't had any problems with the 100+ people that we've hired in orientation. We're doing harassment training today, for example, and all the tables are 6 foot apart and they're all wearing masks. So it's, I think employees, I felt anxiety when we first opened, but I think now, knock on wood, we feel like we've figured it out on how to be safe. But you're just waiting for the day when it hits like one department. And that's the one where you got to worry about. They're talking about the holiday party. We've canceled it. I'm on a group of luxury resorts. There's probably about 20 of us, and everybody's canceled the holiday party. So there is no holiday party at all of our luxury properties. Some are giving out pumpkins, some are giving out turkeys, that kind of thing, but there is no holiday party of any sort. One person asked, is there a former student? I had a former student get a final warning and it was their first write-up. He wants to write a rebuttal so that his side of the complaint is documented. And is that a good idea? And I say, I love it. Write a long rebuttal, write a 5-page rebuttal, all for it. I love rebuttals because.
That's my question there.
Well, I love a rebuttal because.
I just want to make sure that I'm guiding him the right way. I don't want to guide him the wrong way and then he get fired and he's like, but you told me to, so I don't want to guide him the wrong way.
Well, I think from an employer standpoint, having them write a rebuttal is a good thing because the write-up that we're coach and counsel that you're using, I'm signing it, they're signing it, but the signature, what that means from the employee is that they verified that they sat with us. It doesn't mean that they agree, but employees always think that that means they agree. So a lot of times they refuse to sign. And then that's when I bring in another manager, they sign it, we write refuse to sign, we have 2 managers sign it, and we verified that we talked about it. But if the employee says, I'm not signing that at all, but I'm going to write in the margins about all the things I disagree with you about, that proves that we talked to you. So by writing a rebuttal proves that we talked. So that's all I care about. Now, do I think it's a good practice for the employee to do it? I'm on the fence because it can be good if it's done in a professional way. But remember the story of the young lady that I advised to, thank for the feedback. I appreciate for what you said. She wrote up a 5-page rebuttal and threw that in their face and said, this is where I stand by. This is where all the reasons you're wrong. This is how reasons I'm not wrong. I am right in this situation. And this example, and she went through the whole thing. And all it did was make her look as not cooperative, not professional, and not willing to accept any fault. And so it ended up her losing her job. She was in her first 90 days. So it was an easy decision to just say, you know what? It doesn't look like it's going to work out. Goodbye. If she had said what I told her to say, which was thank you for the feedback. And I promise you, I will work harder to be a better person. And then I even told her you could go home and tell your spouse, your loved one, you say that my manager's a jerk. But to the manager, you say, thank you, manager, for all the wonderful feedback. And I really enjoy working for you because you're so talented. And she didn't do that. And so she lost her job. So I think if they do write a rebuttal, I would do it in a professional way. I'd say, thank you for the feedback. I know I'm not a perfect person. I have areas that I need to improve. I understand this and this and this, but I will follow your guidance. I think you may have the wrong facts on this case, but I'm willing to accept the fault and feedback. It has to be more of a professional accepting of that you're listening to them and not a I am 100% right and you're wrong. And then that's when I just think it's, if this lady had been with us for 5 years and she wrote that, we wouldn't have let her go because we would have to go through more of a progressive discipline. But specifically in your first 90 days, that's not a smart move on her part.
Right. I was just wondering if it raised a red flag. And he's like, I want my side of the story to be heard. And I think it was a bride upset about something. Well, he just happened to be at the front desk, so he took the brunt of it. And you're not going to fix an unhappy bride ever, no matter who you are. So, he called for help on it and he still had trouble. And I was like, I think you should write the rebuttal, but do it in a professional way. But we all have seen those angry brides.
I think I don't know. I think one of my things that I've done well in my 20 plus years is and sometimes I chastise myself for it, is I accept the blame they're casting upon me, and I strive to say, okay, I will do better. And sometimes I feel like I wish I would just defend myself better and say, you know what, you're wrong and this is why. But instead I say, yes, sir, absolutely. I know I'm not perfect. I will strive to do better. And I think that has played well for me over the 20 plus years in tennis and as a HR, because I've, have had tough times in other employers that I've been with, and the ability to be able to accept the feedback and then say thank you and then gripe about them at home with your wife or whoever, is a better practice. But trying to fight it through is not always the best thing. Now, if they can do it in a professional way and just say, this is what some of the facts that you're missing, but in the end, I will work on it. Also, another one I use too is the phrase, I learned this one, Hershey, and I love it. Your intent versus impact. So your intent on what you're doing is a good thing. You think you're being good, but your impact on others is something else. And that's a lot of times what could help people, like this gentleman having with the bride. Your intent was to help the guest, the bride, this way, but your impact to them was something else. So you're not really at fault, but you have to just be aware of your impact. And I think that one's pretty useful, that phrase, and it softens people and makes them not as angry, because you're not saying they're wrong.
Thank you for addressing that for me.
Thank you. Another one too is like perception versus reality. You perceive it to be this way, but the reality of it's this way. And that's another one. I have a lot of discussions with employees. What you perceive that you're doing with people is one thing, but the reality is something else. It's similar to intent versus impact, but it's a good talking point for many employees, particularly when you're doing employee relations situations. So probably one of the biggest ones, I don't know if it's a good topic, is the 5-star, getting 5-star. And I like describing 5-star to people, is that Salamander has only one hotel, 1 hour and 15 minutes out in the middle of nowhere, that is 5-star, that's near Salamander. So we are 30 minutes from civilization, which is Leesburg or Winchester. And so there are no 5-star hotels in Winchester, and there's no 5-star hotels in Leesburg. There's 5-star hotels in DC, but that's an hour and a half away. And so when you open this hotel in the very beginning, we opened this resort and nobody here had been in a 5-star environment. Might have been, myself as a manager at Kiowa was there briefly when it was 5-star. Maybe a couple other people, some people on the exec committee, but 400 plus employees had never been in a 5-star hotel. And then you're being asked to, I give examples a lot of times. If you're a teacher of a bunch of students in the class, how many of those students do you think want to do the best they can and get an A, working hard? And you probably get 20% of them. And how many people are in that class that don't really care and they're just there because they have to be? And that might be the bottom fifth. And so in any employer, you have a football team like my Redskins right now that stink, New England Patriots. Generally speaking, the top teams, everyone there is committed to being the very best. And you don't have a lot of people who are just there because they have to be. So that's the biggest challenge I have, is you're taking 400 employees here and you have to teach them that you have to pursue and want to be perfect, provide perfect service, provide the standards perfectly. And that's not an easy thing. If you've ever been on a football team or a sports team or a band or anything, and you look at all the people on the team, not everybody there wants to be the very best. And that's how do we get 400 employees to be like that? And that's the culture. Is that part of it is the most challenging I've had in my career. We were able to achieve it in 2017 and 18 and 19, this 5-star, and it requires a lot of auditing of ourselves and practicing and role plays and auditing some more. I'm doing an audit tonight. I'm staying over at the hotel, eating dinner here, gonna have room service tomorrow. I'm getting a massage in the morning, auditing all those areas. And that's the constant monitoring that we're doing, what helps us get to that 5-star perfect world. But it's always a challenge. There's always somebody that's not on board.
Michael,
Yes.
quick question just on that. I just started at a 5-star property and I'd never been in one before. So it's a very new experience for me as well. And one of the things I have a lot of trouble with is remembering all of the language standards. So the not saying hello and not saying no problem or no worries. As an HR perspective, is there any recommendations or anything you've done with your team to help folks who are new to this process to remember, oh, don't say hello, say good morning or good afternoon or things like that?
Well, I think one is that we have a handout that we do provide people. I think it's also, you could, with your other coworkers, you could, everybody hold each other accountable. And even when you go home, and your girlfriend or your parents, and you go home and you say, hey guys, what's going on? And they go, ah, and, or you say, yeah, they say, no, yes. And they hold you accountable. Or if you say, one of the ones I have is, and if you say, they're saying, and so you have people around you hold you accountable to practice at home too. I like you, I came from Kiowa where it wasn't 5-star initially. For the first 5 years I was there, I was a tennis pro. I was casual as all get out. And then I didn't really have to speak perfectly grammatically there, but then when you went into Hotel Hershey, they were focused on grammar, and then definitely here, and then the orientations we teach, it can be through daily lineups you have with your team where you talk about appropriate verbiage, hold each other accountable within the team, and then also at home, I think is another area. But also we have a handout that we give people to what to use in addition. And I believe also the Forbes, your company pays for Forbes to come there and train.
Yes.
Yeah, so they're helpful too when they can come in and they do little exercises with everybody.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Any other questions for my vast crowd?
Was Roy Barth there when you're tennis pro at Kiowa?
Yes, he was. He was the one that, well, I worked with him. Yes, he was the one that hired me. Yes, I worked with him and Jonathan Barth. And now I guess Jonathan's the director now, so I worked with him.
I know Jonathan a little bit. I never really knew Roy much.
Yeah, the Roy Barth Tennis Center now. He's really.
I know it.
What
When's
years
last-
were you in Kiowa?
I guess it was 97. I started off as a tennis pro in March, and I was getting a master's degree. And by the time I reached, I think that's right. I graduated. No, I think I lied. It's been a long time ago. Yeah, 86 is high school, 90 is college. So 91 is when I started at Kiowa as a tennis pro, and then did that 5 years until 97, and then went into HR. So
is there any advice you can give? I'm going to be working with J1s for the first time in my managerial career. I'm a little worried. I don't know why, but just knowing that we're going to have a couple folks here and I'm going to have to train them, from out of country. So is there any advice or anything you've can recommend for that?
I had my exposure to it was J1s was at Hershey. We brought in for my property, probably Hotel Hershey brought in 10. And then at the Hershey Park probably brought in another 120. I know I don't know how this association or this group works here, but there's another gentleman, Daniel Lindsay. He's a recreation director. He came from Kiowa. He came here and now he's down at the Henderson. They deal with him down there a lot.
Oh yeah, we do. That's where I am.
We don't have them in here. So, but the times that we dealt with them is you really have to understand the differences in the cultures. Driving on the side of the road, what kind of food do they eat? What is, sexual harassment? How how do you follow progressive discipline? Where do you, I mean, just basic stuff. What does a dollar look like? What does 50 cents look like? You have to invest some time into that because they don't know what they're getting into when they come here. You know, I saw Henderson, they were bringing in people from like Honduras or something who have never been here before.
They put them up in housing here, and Sandestin Resort does the same. And I'm within 4 miles of all of these resorts, and I've been at one of the resorts for 21 years. And they give them a bicycle, and there's like one road on Highway 98 that's super, super busy. And so they just don't have the, they give them a bicycle and they have them all wear black as their uniform. And then they get off of work at 11 o'clock at night. And I'm like, and not the Henderson, but if you're going to do that, you've got to give them the safety vest, the helmet, the light, give them everything to support them on transportation, or give them a shuttle at those hours, or all of those. I've given ladies rides to the bank. They get their check and they can't take it to the bank. They don't have physical transportation to get somewhere. We don't have a transit here in Destin, and it's just tourists, and there's usually drunk tourists driving everywhere. And I just worry about the J1s in this area because they don't have that kind of support. Here's how we've set up so that you can come here in HR and be safe and take your picture of your check, and it goes directly to your, as in you gotta hold their hand a little bit, and just make sure they're safe, not only on the clock, but off the clock. That's my Destin, Florida gig.
I think it's excellent. I think it's just, yeah. I think maybe even getting a committee of people together to talk about all the different things, transportation, the policies, what those look like. I'm just making one up, but maybe in Honduras, you can say sexually harassing things back and forth, but you come to the United States and you say something like that, you immediately lose your job. So they need to be immediately aware of the differences and the currency, and they're going to be focused on getting their 40 hours. So if you only given them 27 hours, they're not going to like that either. So making sure they give them their full hours, making sure they're working in the area that you promised them and they're making the money that you promised them.
Many of them are sending that money home.
Yes. And they're paying a lot of money, some of them, to come over here. They're spending $1,000 or $2,000 to come over. And in Hershey, they were constantly complaining in my office about not making the money right away.
And their travel to get here too, most of the time.
The travel, yes, all of those things. So
they pay the company that they're going through to get to the resort to begin with, just to get the interviews.
Absolutely. So
I would say the way that you spoon feed the interns coming in and the intern program, you have to do that like trifold with the J1s. They're adults, but they're just overwhelmed when they get here. And there's so much training in the first 2 weeks. They're overwhelmed. They don't even know their needs.
Thank you.
I don't know, any other topics we want to cover? I don't know. I can cover some more HR related things like progressive discipline.
I just saw that we have about 2 minutes left.
Oh, we do?
Yeah,
Okay.
It does jump back to the lobby in about 2 minutes.
Well, I can cover one last thing, just progressive discipline. A lot of that, this is just my philosophy on how to following progressive discipline. I always wondered when I was younger, what is it? A verbal warning, written warning? How many of those write-ups can you give somebody before they're fired? And my general rule of thumb is you want to think of a chair. You have 4 corners of a chair. You got the 4 legs. And if you have, it could be 3 legs or 4 legs, but if you have a written, verbal, written, verbal, 3 verbals, 1 written, 2 writtens, 2 verbals, doesn't matter. You have a strong base at the foundation. So you have 3 or 4 verbals or written. And then after that, you build on your chair that has the strength of those things below it. And then you give a second written, and then you give a final written, and then it's separation. So the 3 or 4 at the base build the thing to the top. And that's generally the way I would recommend it. Now, if you're in your first 90 days, it could be 2 verbals, 2 written. And at least in Virginia, we can say, you know what, it's not working out, goodbye. And there's limited risk. But after that, questions my lawyer always asks me is, what's the race? How old are they? Male or female? religion, they want to know everything. And so I'll say, well, it's a white male under 40. Well, then that's the least risk, but still having a verbal, or written, verbal, whatever 3 or 4 combinations, and then the second written, then the final written, and then the termination. In my career, that if you have that in every case, you'll be successful. So I used to wonder, how many verbals do you have to give somebody before you can terminate? But I remember Roy Barth wrote me up and gave me a verbal warning, and I will admit it. And I was wrong, and I admitted it.
And now look at you.
And now look at me. I was sitting on a golf cart studying for my master's degree off in a corner somewhere. And he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I'm reading a book. He wrote me up for it, and I was angry, but I'll never forget it. So at the time, I thought I was going to get fired for that one verbal. And today I look at it and go, "Mike, just lighten up. It was only a verbal warning and you were wrong." So that was
Thanks, Mike. I think our room's closing in 10 seconds. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
Hey,
Michael.
You were
for
amazing. Thank
everything.
you.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Over. All right.